I am delighted to be moderating this panel discussion on trends in new construction. And who better to have on that panel than the gentleman to my right. And although they don't need any introduction, I'm going to just highlight from their biographical notes. And first is Billy Smith, fellow I know oh so well. Used to work for him when I was president of IYC, and Trinity owned IYC at that time. Billy's been one of the most recognizable leaders in the industry, as we all know. His deep roots in recreational boating, and one common denominator about all of our speakers and presenters, they all love boating. That's a culture that I've discovered at MarineMax, as a matter of fact. Everybody in there loves boating. You better love boating if you're going to be out there selling boats. He's a former sailboat racer, deep-sea fisherman, allowed him to thoroughly understand customer needs and desires to appreciate the exacting nature of conceiving, building, managing, and owning superyachts. He's former founder, shareholder, and vice president of Trinity Yachts. Billy's had the position founder of Trinity Yachts in 1988. They delivered 57 mega yachts with a total value exceeding $1 billion and representing more than 25% of all super yachts built in the United States. In February of this year, Billy joined the largest retailer of boats in the United States, MarineMax, as vice president of the super yacht division. And Steve Gale, got Steve's notes here someplace. Steve Gale also has a long time experience in the yachting business. Back to 1977 at Endeavor Yachts, Clearwater, Florida, on the assembly line. Also did some work at Gulfstar, Hatteras, Allied Marine, then moved into a sales position in 1993 at that time. In 2001, an opportunity presented itself at a new publicly held marine retailer by the name of MarineMax, and Steve made the move and helped create the motor yacht division. He's now MarineMax Pier 66 general manager, heading up Southeast regional sales for Ocean Alexander. And Andy, fellow member of the board of directors of EBA, raised in Lexington, South Carolina. His boating career, as is many of you, child sailing and spending his days running around on Lake Murray in a Boston Whaler, which is great. His first experience was with a small house in Fort Pierce.
When you started in the boat business, I got my first whaler in 77.
He hired by a famous name, Dick Bassett, to cover Sea Ray Brokerage in Palm Beach and Martin County, then MarineMax and HMY, and joined Westport soon after that, and where he has a prestigious position as a manager at Westport. So we're going to be talking about trends in building, but I'm going to change the format just a little bit. As something sparks an idea with you, we're not going to wait till the end for Q&A, but if something you'd like to have a clarification or you have a question about something that one of the panelists might mention, go ahead and raise your hand and let's handle it at that time. We'll see how that goes as well, because we don't want those things to be forgotten and maybe not addressed at some point in time. So I'm just going to change the program just a little bit. I'm going to start out. I was thinking about asking this question as the final question, but I think I'm going to ask it as the first question. I'm going to ask each of our panelists, starting with Billy, and then work our way to the right. Billy, what does the future of U.S. yacht building look like? The future.
Well, I think the future right now is much brighter than it was in, from the recession, 09, 2010. I mean, the reality is in September of 08, when the recession hit, Trinity had 24 yachts on order. Okay, and since that time, I think we only signed up about 4 yachts before we sold the company 2 years ago. So there was this huge backlog, and then it just evaporated. I think right now everybody's been experiencing a bit of the Trump effect, where the glass went from half empty to half full. Whether or not things have really changed or not is one thing, but as long as people are optimistic, they tend to be more interested in buying. What we've seen, of course, is anywhere from 40 to 50% of the European shipyards backlog is Americans. So why are they not staying here? And with the exception of Westport, Delta, Berger's trying to come back, the U.S. yards have been just decimated with the recession, and it's been very, very hard to come back. So I think things are going to be okay for Delta, Westport, Berger, Christensen, possibly. But these Americans think that you've got to go to Europe for pedigree, for primarily, I think it's the pedigree that they're going to Europe for. And then you've also got the pressure that the Far East builders, are now building into the 150-foot range. So you've got pressure from the bottom coming up, and then you've got, these guys wanting boats that are just unavailable in the U.S., 300, 400-foot yachts. There is no U.S. yard that can build boats in that size range. So the American builders are kind of getting squeezed.
Steve?
I think the future is bright for American boat builders, and I look at all the different manufacturers that we deal with at MarineMax: Boston Whaler, Sea Ray, Ocean Alexander. Ocean Alexander, in the last 2 years, took over a factory up in Merritt Island. They're building a 70-foot yacht there. They look at this market as an emerging market, and the challenge that they all have is finding the labor, the workforce, the skilled workforce to build these boats. The orders are there. Sea Ray can't keep up with demand. Boston Whaler certainly is building a lot of boats. They're smaller boats, but those boats, Sea Ray's building boats all the way up to $3.5–4 million today. And it's a big component of our success. And it gives us the opportunity to move those clients up into the bigger stuff that Ocean Alexander is building. So Ocean Alexander would like to build larger yachts here in the U.S., and it bodes well for the U.S. market. With that, labor costs in these foreign markets are going up, and it's making the American worker more competitive.
Great. Yeah, the 42 Boston Whaler, who would have ever thought a 42 Whaler would be $1 million boat? And they're selling the hell out of them, too,
It's unbelievable.
Yep. Andy?
Look, if you look at where we are as a yard now, we're about 50% of production where we were in 2008. At that time, we had about a 3-year backlog, and we're back up to probably about a year and a half. If you wanted to buy a new 130 today, November of 19 is the next available hull. We've got half a dozen yachts under construction right now. The interest level has picked up substantially. We have met the market with our 125, and it's more of a European design. It has some interior attributes that we think are more appealing worldwide. And we're going to things that are, at-rest stabilization, Seakeeper. That's the new bow thruster of today. And but some of the challenges you have, Billy had touched on the cost of the power plants in these boats, with meeting EPA, and those are some of the things that we grapple with, are the cost of engines, the cost of this new technology, and then production costs are up, but we do feel the rise in international labor costs will help us out as well.
I want to stay with you just a second now. I want to get back to market conditions. And I've got my own theory on the attitude about wealth in the United States, and I know a lot of you have heard me pontificate on that in the past about how it's sort of frowned upon here in the United States to be wealthy. And I think that pushes a lot of our business offshore or over to into Europe and all that. But what about, let's go back 10 years ago and talk about the customer himself, or maybe even longer than that. Let's go back 20 years. What are the clients like now as compared to, the prospects like now as compared to what people we were talking to 20 years ago?
We still have a very mature customer base. We don't have, you rarely see any, and this is across the brokerage market in general from my experience, you don't have any of the flash that you had in 2005. The people that I've been dealing with seem to be much more reserved and much more cautious. They're a lot more under radar. That's kind of the way I see it. I don't know what...
Well, Steve, you were nodding there. Did you have something to add?
I agree with him. I think we have a similar buyer. I mean, Ocean Alexander is a premium brand, and it's a conservative buyer. They fly under the radar. We're not seeing the millennials step up and buy boats, or the .com guys.
And is there any reason for that? Do you speculate?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
That is something that baffles my mind, and it'd be interesting to know if in aviation, I think that they're not buying planes, and they're not buying yachts. The young guys are. they're more renting, chartering, net jetting. But then again, you know, you have to let that 30-year-old mature into what their tastes are, what they, you know, and build a family. And that, I think that's what gets you into yachting on a bigger scale.
Billy, any opinion on that?
Well, yeah, I think the idea that the millennials are into the instant gratification, the experience of, you know, and they're chartering, but that means somebody who owns that yacht is getting charters from them. So I think it bodes well for the industry that there is young wealth coming up, and they're becoming more aware of yachting. So I think anytime the cruise industry is doing well and the charter industry is doing well, it's going to reflect eventually into new yacht sales.
You know, the other statistic that I love, you've heard it a million times. We have a question back here already? Great. What is that?
It's from me, Bob. I've had my gummy bears. I want to go back to your opening question to Billy about what we can expect in the future. One of the things that I'm bumping up more and more presently is Tier 3, Tier 4 regulations. And can they speak to that and how that's impacting their respective business?
Can we first explain what Tier 3 and Tier 4 regulations are? Summary? Who would like to tackle that one? Or would you like to tackle it, Jeff?
Well, basically, it's stricter pollution controls, control of CO2, nitrous oxide, particulate matter in the atmosphere. And on some of the yachts now, you've got to have filters on your generators, which takes up technical space, adds more cost to the boats, zero discharge for sewage and whatnot.
So the question is, are these things impacting new boat sales?
We're building around it. We actually took our 85 Pacific Mariner out of production because of that. But, you know, it's funny, during the Miami show, I was talking with an engineer at Viking Yacht Company, and they are really worried about this 2021 mandate. And I believe it revolves around the DEF fluid and whatnot. If you have a diesel pickup truck on the road right now, you have to run this DEF fluid. It's an exhaust scrubber. But the implementation of that into like the smaller sport fish boats and, you know, with a high horsepower, and where are you going to put all this additional equipment? So that's been a stressor.
But you say you discontinued the 85 Pacific Mariner, is that correct?
We did discontinue it.
Was it a cost factor or was it a room factor for the equipment, or both?
In order to meet tier, we would have had to change to a different engine design.
Okay.
That would not fit in the allowable space. So we decided to pull that boat and maybe readdress it down the road with something like a 92. But for right now, the 125 and we have a 145 on the drawing board that's getting our engineering department's attention.
Okay.
With Ocean Alexander, they have met all the compliancy rules. They're shipping boats with Tier 3 engines. There's zero discharge on their waste treatment systems. There's waste treatment systems installed on the boats as part of the equipment package that we bring into the United States. So, you know, it does increase the price of the boats. We can't get around that, but it is meeting the EPA regulations.
It's really an issue when you're getting a client coming out of the production, semi-production boats and they want to go custom. That's just another design point. And you know, if they want to go green, okay, then you can start to tell them these are the things we can do today for being green. You can start with the bottom paint. There are bottom paints that have no toxins at all anymore. They work purely on being slippery. And all of the commercial boats are going to it. And the benefit to that is that you get 5 years out of this bottom paint now. You still have to be picked up and change zincs and do your ABS and everything. But the same with the topside paints. You can go very green. We can go to meet all of the emissions. We can go, if they want to go diesel electric on the bigger boats, diesel electric it's an option. We've been doing it commercially and militarily for 30 years. It's not a problem. It's new to yachting, but it's not new technology. So a lot of these things that you can bring into the custom build is existing technology, and we just joke about you paint it white and it's wow, it's yachting now. But it's proven technology because the owners want to be, they want all of this new stuff. They just don't want to be a guinea pig. So when you show them, no, it's an operation over here, here, and here, and we're just going to apply it. It's a transfer of technology versus they're going to be the guinea pigs on new technology. So if that's of importance to them, we can certainly go beyond what the current regulations want. We could get to a true zero-emission boat if that's what they wanted. We even had one client that was looking at an LNG-powered yacht, which
Would you
is
explain
available.
the LNG?
Liquid natural gas. Liquid natural gas, the engines that can burn liquid natural gas are meeting all of the emissions for the foreseeable future for the next 50 years. It's basically on LNG, you've got 1% of the carbon output that you have with diesel engines. And the engines last 2 to 3 times longer because the fuel is so much cleaner than regular diesel.
Yeah.
And so all of this is available, and it's our job to basically educate the clients as to what's available, and then let them choose and pick and choose what they want.
Okay. I'm going to get into innovations in just a little while. We have a question right here. Wait for the microphone, please. It's right around the corner, heading this way.
Thank you. Carlos Dominguez with Dennison Yacht Sales. One of the things I've seen in the trending, and I've always had this question, why the U.S. builders have not addressed it, is expedition-style yachts. This type of long-range cruising. We were talking about millennials, and I know that the trending with them is to have this kind of autonomy and get away, and they're seeking adventure. They're spending more money on experiences than on things. This has been the trend in what these guys that have had substantial income increases because of the internet and whatnot. And I find that the expedition style yacht really kind of they don't really want the flash or pretty boat. They want the functional boat, to have as many toys as possible, to be able to have a sport fish on board, have maybe even a submarine on board, all these things. And so I know we're talking about different.
Did you have a question?
My question is, what is the trend in U.S. boat builders to get into the expedition market? Is there anything on the table?
Now, this came up earlier while we were chatting just earlier. What about the exploration yachts? Expedition
Well,
yachts?
we did 5 of them, and it's a niche market. It's like the really large sport fish market. It's very much a niche market, and you've got to get the right guy. And within expedition yachts, are you talking the house aft style, like Pangaea, Samantha Lind, boats like this, or the house forward style, like Carson, the boat that Newcastle built? So and then again, the design goes back to what are you doing with it? We built 4 of these boats that carry submarines. Okay, what size submarine are you talking about carrying? Things like that. 36-foot sport fish boat complete with tuna tower for fishing. You want to talk range, 10,000-mile range. One boat could sit on generator for over a year without refueling. So all of these are design aspects that you incorporate. The Explorer yachts are actually pretty easy to build compared to the true white yacht. It's just a matter of how much time and effort you're going to spend marketing to what is a pretty small market. But it's very doable. I mean, we delivered a boat in 2000 that was ice classed, and she's done 3 circumnavigations now, but nobody knows about her.
Andy, any comment on that?
Being a series build yard, we have drawn a couple of
Can you explain what a series build yard is, please?
limited production. So one of the reasons why we've been able to weather through is we come up with a footprint and we stick to that footprint, be it the 112, 60 of these boats. Basically the philosophy is that you don't make core changes to the boat. You get the engineering right up front, and then you build on that footprint, and you can do very limited changes to, basically it's just what they call the rocks and the rags, just do the interiors. Now we 7-8 years ago started, we expanded our furniture facility to make the interiors more custom, different wood options, different paneling options, in response to, the custom builders do such a great job with fit and finish. We felt like we needed to meet that a little bit, but that's really the outer edge of our window of what we want to do. We want to be able to produce a boat, deliver it on time, on budget, and that's the beauty of series building. So building an expedition boat, I think that you can't just, every buyer for an expedition boat is going to want something completely different. And it'd be hard to hit that mark in a production boat.
Let's shift gears here for just a second and get back to transactions. And I want you to think how each of you, with your respective positions in the companies you're with now, will work to either build a boat or to buy a dealer boat with third-party brokers. So a broker has a customer and they come to you, Steve or Andy or Billy, and I want to build a boat with Billy. How do you work with those brokers? On what basis do you work with those brokers?
Well, we've done a number of deals with outside brokers at Pier 66. I'm based here at Pier 66. We have product here on the water. I have a 120 and a 100 here and a 90. So we get inquiries all the time from outside houses. I try to provide all the initial information, and then we'll give them a list of the brokers that are experts in the field and ask them to eventually decide which one they want to work with to move forward. That keeps our broker team employed and busy with the actual build process. Typically the boats are in stock, so we're ready for immediate delivery. They're turnkey yachts, so it's a streamlined process, and it works well within our organization.
Okay. Andy?
Pretty much the same thing. We are really big on supporting relationships in the brokerage community, and it's been a key part of the success of the yard. Any outside broker, there are a large number of yachts that Westport we've built that have been built through outside brokers. But we basically handle the whole construction process. We bring that broker in, keep them involved in what's happening. But we welcome that. We've got 7 guys in our office, and most of these guys have relationships with the brokerage community. So a lot of those sales happen. This is a common thing to build a boat with an outside broker at Westport.
What role do you want that broker to play in that process, though? Does he ever lose contact with the client?
Never. No, that you treat those two as their friends, and you bring them in, and listen, even when I build a boat, a new boat, I turn them over. The yard has a set number of people, be it engineering and sales within the shipyard, that deal with the customer's representative on a regular basis. So not that it's hands off, but we don't have to do so much because it is a series build boat. You have a few different meetings with design and whatnot, but it's a pretty easy process. We make it a comfortable process for the outside agent, and it works really well.
So, Billy, in your new role at MarineMax Superyacht Division, and if somebody comes to you with a broker, comes to you with a customer?
Yeah, we'd be happy to work with them. The main thing that when the broker comes to us with a client, that's when I would revert to the experience of the custom yacht building, and let's find out what kind of boat best suits this client's needs, and then from that we can decide, okay, these are the yards that would be the best yards for that type of boat. We don't want to try and put a square peg in a round hole. And then we can continue that. For instance, we were talking security. We can then expose the client to some of the security people that we knew from our background building vessels for the Navy SEALs. What kind of hardening of the hull and superstructure we can do, the windows, biochemical warfare systems that we can discreetly put on the boat, a whole bunch of things that we can do to customize the boat for that guy. And then if we can find a builder here in the U.S., because really any good competent yard, if you walk in there with the right design, representation and the right management during the build, you can get a great boat built here in the U.S. The problem that you're going to have with that is you're not going to have the pedigree. So from a resale standpoint, there might be some exposure there. If the client says, look, I want this boat, I prefer to build it here in the U.S., I can think of a number of yards that can do it, but it's going to require a lot of hand-holding.
Say somebody wants to build a Westport, Andy, and how does a broker register a client with Westport?
Well, basically, if you,
And at what point does that become a legitimate, credible?
add a letter of intent.
Okay.
But typically this, the initial call, nothing happens quickly, so the initial contact to the point of there's been a lot of interaction between the yard and the outside agent. So it's kind of a growth process. By the time it gets to the point of I'm selling a new boat, there's been a lot of communication, and it works really, really well. But registering a customer, so to speak, is something that's we openly do and recognize who the customer is. Typically, it's like I said, it's a complex deal. We don't really have people that just call and want to register a name. That was something back in '05 maybe you had, but now
Here's my list.
Yeah, really, that's phone booking. But it's an easy process.
Steve?
It's a similar process, that Andy uses. It's communication. Once the broker calls us, we'll ask him for the name, and MarineMax has a unified database. If he is working with someone within the organization, we'll put him in touch with. We'll put that broker in touch with the broker that's spoken to that client in the past.
We do a
And
lot
let
of
them work.
partnering as well.
Yeah, you let them work together to get the deal done. And
One thing we have learned as brokerage houses and builders, everybody needs to work together and keep the client happy and keep the client in the yachting experience. Commissions are very important, and that's why we're here. But I'm one of the first people that I know if I'm working directly against someone else, I'll call him up and I'll say, hey, why don't we split them? And let's work them together when you can, because everybody wins at that point, And really, between, MarineMax and Westport and whatnot, I have great relationships with many salespeople at MarineMax as well. And, we take that open communication approach to working clients, and it's worked out well.
Any questions from anybody? How are we doing on time here? Because I'm not wearing a watch. Okay, I want to talk about bells and whistles now. What is the latest and the greatest as far as technology, building technology is concerned? What are the must-haves? Okay, you talked about Seakeeper stabilization and all that. Billy, what's your opinion on that?
Well, zero speed's been a requirement.
Can you explain to the unknown what zero speeds are?
The stabilization at anchor, whether it comes from flume tanks, whether it comes from gyros, whether it comes from active fin stabilization, the idea that the boat is at anchor and it's stabilized. Okay. In fact, one of our owners was telling us when he was at Chelsea Pier in New York Harbor, he kept his stabilization on because it was such a choppy environment. That has made a huge difference in yachting. It's now basically a standard, as is when you get into the larger boats, let's say 130 feet and up, tri-deck boats, classification, building to the Maritime Coast Guard Agency, MCA. A lot of these things that you're going to build into the boat, again, it's for the resale, or it's for the ability of the owner to charter the boat if he decides to charter the boat while he owns it. But now you having, they don't want to see tenders. They have to be hidden. They want beach clubs in the stern, where the transom either folds down, opens up, but they want that whole beach club thing in the stern. Again, some of the boats are carrying submarines. The big water slides that fold off from the upper deck.
The amenities.
All these amenities. They want all the, all these fun things. These yachts are basically movable islands that, you know, are for entertainment, and they can go anywhere, and they want all their fun toys there.
Steve, what are they asking for, or what are you telling them?
I tell you, the way the boats are coming in today, and going back 20, 30 years ago when you had to put a water maker and all the electronics in and you know, spend another 3 months outfitting a boat, the boats today are completely turnkey that we're bringing into inventory. So the dishes, the silverware, the glassware, zero-speed stabilizers, waste treatment systems, the beach club in our 120. I mean, it's there, and it's ready. It's for the guy that wants instant gratification. And then you put a name brand designer doing the interior. It's a great mix, and makes the boats very appealing. So I think that's the innovation. That's where we've seen the industry go over the last 30 years, where you just back in the early 80s with Hatteras, you bought a cookie cutter, you know, non-finished Hatteras, and you had to finish that boat at the marina at Hatteras on the river and spend 3 months basically outfitting that boat. Today they're turnkey, ready to go.
Andy?
AV onboard entertainment that actually works has been a big thing for us, big challenge. And we've been meeting it by taking on a lot of proprietary changes to our equipment that we're using, but Crestron and, you know, people get on board, they want the same thing they have in their homes. So they want to get on board and grab an iPad and put the blinds up and go through their, you know, whatever they want to watch or hear or do on board the boat. And it sounds easy, but it's just a nightmare keeping all that going. You have so many televisions on board a boat. I was at Lurison 2 months ago, and this boat that's under construction, we did a walkthrough on 141 televisions. 141 televisions on this boat.
Wow. What about this, what conversation do you have with, or what do you hear from your customers in terms of charter potential? I've had scores of conversations with MarineMax clients who are interested in buying the yacht in the event they're able to generate some charter activity. And I see more and more, when I do yacht inspections these days, more and more of them are, as you say, turnkey for the charter business. And I'll ask your opinion in a second, but for those of you that are transacting yachts and finding resistance because of concerns for cost, you should be trying to sell them as charter businesses. Because chartering is a great way for one to psychologically justify the acquisition by saying, well, I can only use this thing 6 or 8 weeks a year. What am I going to do the rest of the time? And you can say, well, why don't you talk about chartering? And so what are you finding these days? I've done a lot of talks with a lot of Steve Gale clients. I know that. None with Andy, though. I got to get to you, buddy. Andy, what do you hear these days?
We are...
There's a lot of good Westports out there chartering, I can tell you that.
And it seems like just about every boat we're building, whether the owner, when it launches, whether they decide to put it into charter or not, but they question us very heavily about it. There is a strong market just in that 100-foot, you know, it doesn't have to be a Westport, but that 100 to 130-foot sector of anything, I think is a good late model boat's going to charter pretty strongly. And, you know, and some of these boats, if they're placed, you know, in Newport in the summer and they're in the right place at the right time, I think they have to turn away business with the economy the way it is right now.
Certainly strong in Europe, and there's a lot of Americans chartering in Europe right now. About 60% of your charter activity takes place between the Eastern and Western Mediterranean. A lot of Americans going over there. You know, if you take a look at WealthX and what they're saying about the United States, there are about 2,500 billionaires in the world, and about a third of them live in the United States. And the United States is like 3 times ahead of the next country down and all that. And Cindy is waving at me. I'm going to open this. I had some questions about after-sale concerns and warranty issues and all that, but I'm going to skip that for right now. Are there any questions from out here? These guys, you got to take advantage of them. You have over like 10 years of experience here. Over here.
I'm coming. Hold on, Wayne.
This goes back to the engine situation. I assume all the foreign builders are going to have to meet all the U.S. EPA standards and all that for their engines?
Yeah, it's international standards. Actually, the European standards were a bit higher than the U.S. standards for a while, but it's basically becoming worldwide. And they're just not going to let you in a port unless you can prove that these are current, clean engines. They're grandfathered in the old stuff, but it even gets back to if you want to repower, you got to be very careful now. They're going to make you upgrade if you're going to buy an old boat and want to repower and things. So it's not something that you can get around. It was like when MCA first started coming in, the builders just had to adapt to it. It's just not going to be, well, let's try and figure out a way around it. No, this is coming. Let's just deal with it, design it into the boat, and let's get on with business.
Any questions? Any other questions? Well then,
The only thing I'd like to close with, Bob, we were talking about all these Americans going to Europe to build their boats. As brokers, remind these guys that it would be a lot easier to bring that Italian designer to the U.S. to build a boat than for the owner to have to go over there to build a boat. And we'll just close with that.
I think that's a good way to close. Any other comments? Otherwise, I want to thank...
We've got 600 guys we've got to keep in shoes and socks, so.
Well, Billy used to always say it's the greatest redistribution of wealth in the United States. You put 500 people to work for about 5 years, and then they go out and spend in their local communities and all that.
Yeah.
That's what the government should be saying.
If you want to
Not
read
that it's evil to be wealthy. Okay.
yachts are a very efficient way to distribute money.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank Andy, Steve, and Billy. I want to hear a nice round of applause for them, please.
Good job.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.